Welcome to the Folktale Project. This is Dan Scholz. This week we're beginning a new book. This is Redcap Tales, Stolen from the Treasure Chest of the Wizard of the North by Samuel Crockett. And we're going to begin with a little bit of exposition before we get into the actual stories. So this is Certain Small Pharaohs That Knew Not Joseph. It was all Sweetheart's fault, and this is how it came about. She and I were at Dryburgh Abbey, sitting quietly on a rustic seat and looking toward the aisle in which slept the great dead. The long-expected had happened, and we had made pilgrimage to our Mecca. Yet, in spite of the still beauty of the June day, I could see that a shadow lay upon our sweetheart's brow.
"Oh, I know he was great," she burst out at last. "And what you read me out of the life was nice. I like hearing about Sir Walter, but—"
I knew what was coming. "But what?" I said, looking severely at the ground so that I might be able to harden my heart against the pathos of Sweetheart's expression.
"But I can't read the novels. Indeed, I can't. I've tried Waverley at least 20 times, and as for Rob Roy—"
Even the multiplication table failed here, and at this, variously asprawl on the turf beneath, the smaller fry giggled.
"Course,"
said Hugh John, who was engaged in eating grass like an ox.
"we know it is true about Rob Roy. She read us one whole volume, and there wasn't no Rob Roy, nor any fighting in it. So we pelted her with fir cones to make her stop and read over Treasure Island to us instead." "Yes, though we had heard it 20 times already,"
commented Sir Toady Lion, trying his hardest to pinch his brother's legs on the sly.
"Books without pictures is silly,"
said a certain Maid Margaret, a companion new to the honorable company, who was weaving daisy chains, her legs crossed beneath her Turk fashion. In literature she had got as far as words of one syllable, and had a poor opinion even of them. "I had read all Scott's novels long before I was your age," I said reprovingly. The children received this announcement with the cautious silence with which every rising generation listens to the experiences of its elders when retailed by way of odious comparison.
said Sir Toady, the licensed in speech. "We know all that. Oh, yes, and you didn't like fruit, and you liked medicine in a big spoon, and eating porridge, and—" "Oh, we know,"
cried all the others in chorus. Whereupon I informed them what would have happened to us 30 years ago if we had ventured to address our parents in such a fashion. But Sweetheart, with the gravity of her age upon her, endeavored to raise the discussion to its proper level.
"Scott writes such a lot before you get at the story," she objected, knitting her brows. "Why couldn't he have just begun right away? With Squire Trelawney and Dr. Livesey drawing at their pipes in the oak-panelled dining-room, and Black Dog outside the door, and Pew come tapping along the road with his stick,"
cried Hugh John, turning off a sketchy synopsis of his favorite situations in fiction.
"Now that's what I call a proper book,"
said Sir Toady, hastily rolling himself out of the way of being kicked. For with these unusual children, the smooth, ordinary upper surfaces of life covered a constant succession of private wars and rumors of wars, which went on under the table at meals, in the schoolroom, and even, it is whispered, in church. As for blithe Maid Margaret, she said nothing, for she was engaged in testing the capacities of a green slope of turf for turning somersaults upon. "In Sir Walter Scott's time," I resumed gravely, "novels were not written for little girls."
"Then why did you give us Miss Edgeworth to read?"
said Sweetheart quickly. But I went on without noticing the interruption. "Now, if you like, I will tell you some of Sir Walter's stories over again, and then I will mark in your own little edition the chapters you can read for yourselves." The last clause quieted the joyous shout which the promise of a story, any sort of a story, had called forth. An uncertain look crept over their faces, as if they scented afar off that abomination of desolation, lessons in holiday time.
"Must we read the chapters?"
said Hugh John unhopefully.
"Tell us the stories anyway, and leave it to our honor,"
suggested Sir Toady Lion with a twinkle in his eye.
"Oh, it's a story. Oh, don't begin without me."
Maid Margaret called from behind the trees, her sturdy 5-year-old legs carrying her to the scene of action so fast that her hat fell off on the grass and she had to turn back for it. "Well, I will tell you, if I can, the story of Waverley," I said.
"Was he called after the pens?"
said Toady Lion the irreverent, but under his breath. He was, however, promptly kicked into silence by his peers, seriously this time, for he who interferes with the telling of a story is a whelk, which, for the moment, is the family word for whatever is base, mean, unprofitable, and unworthy of being associated with. But first I told them about the writing of Waverley, and the hand at the Edinburgh back window which wrote and wrote. Only that but the story as told by Lockhart had affected my imagination as a boy. "Did you ever hear of the Unworried Hand?" I asked them.
"It sounds a nice title," said Sir Toady. "Had he only one?"
"It was in the early summer weather of 1814, I began, after a dinner in a house on George Street, that a young man, sitting at the wine with his companions, looked out the window and, turning pale, asked his next neighbour to change seats with him.
"There it is, at it again," he said, with a thump of his fist on the table that made the decanters jump and clattered the glasses. "It has haunted me every night these 3 weeks. Just when I am lifting my glass, I look through the window, and there it is at it, writing, always writing."
So the young men, pressing about, looked eagerly, and lo! Seen through the back window of a house in a street built at right angles, they saw the shape of a man's hand writing swiftly, steadily, on large quarto papers. As soon as one was finished, it was added to a pile which grew and grew, rising as it were visibly before their eyes.
"It goes on like that all the time, even after the candles are lit," said the young man, "and it makes me ashamed. I get no peace for it when I am not at my books. Why cannot the man do his work without making others uncomfortable?"
Perhaps some of the company may have thought it was not a man at all, but some imprisoned fairy tied to an endless task.
Wizard Michael's familiar spirit, or Lord Solus's imp Redcap doing his master's bidding with a goose quill.
But it was something much more wonderful than any of these. It was the hand of Walter Scott, finishing Waverley at the rate of a volume every 10 days.
"Why did he work so hard?"
demanded Hugh John, whom the appearance of 50 hands diligently writing would not have annoyed. No, not if they had all worked like sewing machines. "Because," I answered, "the man who wrote Waverley was beginning to have more need of money. He had bought land, he was involved in other people's misfortunes. Besides, for a long time, he had been a great poet, and now of late there had arisen a greater."
"I know," cried Sweetheart. "Lord Byron. But I don't think he was. Anyway, Fitzjames and Roderick Dhu is ripping," announced Hugh John. Rising to his feet, he whistled shrill in imitation of the outlaw.
It was the time to take the affairs of children at the fullness of the tide. "I think," I ventured, "that you would like the story of Waverley if I were to tell it now. I know you will like Rob Roy. Which will be first?" Then there were counter-cries of Waverley and Rob Roy, all the fury of a contested election, but Sweetheart, waiting till the brawlers were somewhat breathed, indicated the final sense of the meeting by saying quietly,
"Tell us the one the hand was writing."
And that is certain small pharaohs that knew not Joseph. And this is the story of how this book came to be, of how Samuel Crockett decided to tell the stories that we're going to tell later. This is Dan Scholz with the Folktale Project. Don't forget that you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, Overcast, anywhere you like to get your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at Folktale Project. You can find us on Auto Radio, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, anywhere you'd like to listen. And you can always head over to folktaleproject.com, where you'll find a new story waiting for you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. As always, thank you so much for listening.